Hello and welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Well, ready or not, it's here, and we've got another 6 months to live through it. June 1st, we enter the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, and so far, we've got another active season on our hands. With tropical storms Arthur and Bertha formed even before the season started, we need to all prepare for the unexpected. Forecasters predict an above-normal season with a minimum of 3 major hurricanes. Tonight on this edition of On the Record, we dive into the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season with our topic, Repair and Prepare. I'm Jerome Sawyer, your host. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. The project really pays itself back.
Correct.
They set up
at the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Over the past 4 years, there have been some 31 hurricanes formed in the Atlantic, and of those, about half have become major hurricanes, with 3 of those hurricanes making landfall in the Bahamas and leaving a trail of destruction. We must never take it lightly what can happen. My guest for this segment of the show is a meteorologist at the Bahamas Meteorological Department, and the lady who walked us through Hurricane Dorian day by day last year. I want to welcome back to On the Record, Mary Butler. Mary, it's good to see you.
And it's good to be back, Jerome. It's unfortunate that when your audience see me, it's in time of hurricanes, which would signal devastation. But I'm hoping that they will receive my presence at this time.
So let's dive right in and talk about the predictions for this 2020 Atlantic hurricane season.
Well, Jerome, this season, yet again, like last season, has promised to be an above average one. And I will explain certain terminologies that you will hear along the way when referring to hurricanes as average, active, above average. But first, let me just do a reality check. We have up a map, the first map of United States, a plain map, showing United States, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Bahamas. Now, this map has these countries represented on it. The second map, which is the same map, you will see. The second map that has hurricane tracks, storm tracks dating as far back as 1851 to 2019. Notice, this is the same map, but this map is populated with all those storms that would have traversed that area, those countries that I mentioned from 1851 to 2019. What does it say? It says the Bahamas, we are in the middle of Hurricane Alley. As hurricanes are our realities, and every year, this is what we face. So moving forward, we should be more than willing to prepare ourselves for the onset of the season. Now, we're taking a look at the forecasted seasons for 2020. When we talk about an average season, the public would, I feel, have absolutely no knowledge what we're referring to when we say average. But average, according to us, and referring to a hurricane season means that we're looking at a total named storms of 13. Of these 13 storms, we are expecting 7 to achieve hurricane strength. And out of those 7, at least 3 to achieve a Category 3, to be a Category 3 or higher. in strength. Now, last year we termed that an above average season, and rightly so, because last year the prediction was 18 named storms, 6 of which do become hurricanes, and then 3 of which to achieve major hurricane strength, that's a Cat 3 and above. And we had basically that. We had 18 storms and about 5 that at some point in time achieved that hurricane strength of Cat 3 and above. Now for this year, Colorado State is predicting 16 named storms, 8 of which to become hurricanes and 4 major hurricanes. Likewise, the weather company, they have their prediction a little higher, 18 storms they are predicting, 9 of which should achieve hurricane strength and 4 of them becoming major hurricanes. For the names for this year's hurricane season, we have them up on screen. We have already had Tropical Storm Arthur. Arthur marked the first out-of-season storm for us this year, and it also marked the 6th year consecutively we have had out-of-season storms. Wow. Now, we defined our season, our hurricane season, from June 1 to November 31. If we continue to have out-of-season storm consecutively as we're having it now, there may be a need to redefine what we term hurricane season. We may have to extend it a bit. But in any event, the names of the storms are Arthur, Bertha, Christabel, Dolly, Edward, Faye, Gonzalo, Hannah, Isaias, Josephine, Kyle, Laura, Marco, Nana, Omar, Paulette, Rini, Sally, Teddy, Victor, and Wilfred.
Okay, so I've got a couple questions. The first, if we can, I just want us, if we can revisit that slide on the predictions for the year and those numbers. We see to the far left the 13, 7, and 3, but as we move over to the right, Colorado State and the Weather Company, we see higher numbers. Why that different or disparity in numbers?
Okay, each of the different organizations that would produce these prediction scenarios, they rely on their models. From modeling standpoints and also present conditions, what atmospheric conditions that are present, they would give them these storm counts. And from them, and from then, they would then decipher which ones they anticipate to develop into major storms.
Okay. And when you look at the Cat 3 and higher, that seems like a low number 3. But in actuality, some years it feels like we've got a lot more major storms. But how do we get from 7 developing to hurricanes into 3 major storms? If you sort of give us the reasoning behind that.
Okay, major storms. When we say major storms, this is normally the storms that would produce considerable damages. Our norm in the Bahamas, we normally would be affected by 1 or 2 major storms, meaning storms having winds of in excess of 100 miles per hour. 1 or 2. What Dorian did was Dorian shifted our norm. The frequency of storms last year remained quite the same. However, Dorian, that one storm, changed the norm for us. No longer we just anticipating, okay, receiving some winds, say for about a minute or 2, in excess of 100 miles per hour. But we're looking at now being impacted by winds in excess of 200 miles per hour. And the possibility of the storm affecting a particular area or island lasting for up to 48 hours. So our mitigation efforts should now be centered on mitigating against damages of winds in excess of 200 miles per hour and storm surges up to 30 feet. That's our new norm now.
To hear you say that, I literally had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach just to hear you say that we're in this new norm. One of the tools that you all rely on is the radar system.
Oh, yes.
And I
yes.
wanted to talk about our radar system as it is now and what the capabilities are of tracking these storms. Because a lot of times, I mean, just in looking at the map, a lot of times we are covered in relation to South Florida and Cuba and these larger land masses without having I would say, a more precise picture
That's
of
right.
the storm moving through our island chain. Can you talk us through what our radar capabilities are now at this point in accurately or more accurately tracking the storms as they move through?
Okay. What you see here on the screen now is a total coverage. This is what you will see after all of the radars have been installed in the entire Bahamas. And the whole purpose of this radar project is to provide complete coverage of all the entire Bahamas. That's inclusive of all the islands. We have now, as the status of this project, we have radar in Abaco, Marsh Harbor. We have radar in Nassau. We have a radar in Millerton, Long Island. And so outstanding is our radar in Ragged Island and also in Maguana. So we have 3 already installed, ready to go, and 2 that's in the process of installation.
Are you able to say when those 2 may be installed and ready to go?
Well, we were in the process from last year in getting it done, but we've had the delays based on COVID and also Dorian, so it will take a while to get it done, but we are on it. As soon as the country opens up, the guys are able to get into those islands, we'll start commence installation.
Will that in any way, as we are now, affect the accuracy of what you're able to predict as those storms are moving through? You've got 3 out of 5.
What it will do is it will further it. Most definitely, we wouldn't be able to see it out of range. Say, for instance, a storm moving from the southeast coming up the chain. We wouldn't be able to view that storm from Inagua and Turks and Caicos in that area there. Inagua and Turks and Caicos. When it reaches near to Long Island, then we'll be able to watch the storm progress up the island chain.
What are we relying on now to cover those
Satellite
islands?
pictures. We are relying on satellite pictures. But the radar would most definitely define exactly where the feeder bands, we can say without a doubt, where the feeder bands are, where they're affecting, and the quantity of rainfall that that area will be receiving at that time.
One of the things that I heard in the news conference that was held by NEMA, and I think it was someone from the Department of Meteorology, spoke about the characteristics of the storm surge and the
Yes.
fact that now we are paying a lot more attention to the storm surge. I want to talk about that and sort of that, if that's a phenomena for us, or is it the result of the increase in the strength and size of these storms?
No, well, examining the postmortem, an informal postmortem of Dorian, the first thing that came to mind and was suggested were maps, storm maps. Because there was an instance where in Grand Bahama, a family evacuated from their home into designated by NEMA shelter. And that shelter became immediately compromised,
I heard
and
a
they
few
had
stories
to
of that,
had
yeah.
to move. Okay, so the whole point of having these storm maps, the storm maps would have definitely the different scenarios that will tell you. You can give the NEMA and the public definite instructions on where the storm, the surges expected, how far it's expected to go in, which settlements specifically, and give them a general idea of the height of the water, so that if there's need to evacuate from a particular area, you will be directed into an area that will be better suited for your
So
safety.
accuracy in where to go.
Yes, and also too, and in our role as meteorologists, because first and foremost is safety of lives and then property. So we are responsible for guiding the public through storms, their path, and safely bringing them through the entire season. So this is one way of us trying to do it even better.
And that provides just a little more comfort for us. One of the things I want to address before we go is the issue of evacuations. There has been a lot of public debate about mandatory evacuations and people pushing back and saying, you can't force me to leave, and the government can't make me leave. But I want you to tell us and try and get people to understand the importance of evacuating when people say to, or the officials, you all, government, whomever, says to evacuate, the importance of that, and what potentially could have been avoided in Dorian if some people had just listened and evacuated from some areas.
Well, Jerome, what I would like to say, and I truly would want to believe at this point in time, is that all of us who went through Dorian now have a better understanding and a better appreciation for when you were told to evacuate.
I hope to God so.
I'm hoping they do that. And what it did at that point, even though everybody, the news media and the Prime Minister, everybody, they try to get in there, and they try to encourage them to
pleaded with people to leave. We pleaded with them to leave.
They, in essence, risked the lives of those first responders who had to go in there and safely remove those ones who remained behind. I'm hoping this time, because of this event, that the Bahamas, they can appreciate exactly what went into them the last season, and pay attention.
And
listen.
Move when we say to move.
Listen.
Mary, we are out of time in this segment, but thank you so much. It's good to see you. And I don't take this the wrong way. I will see you no time soon. But it's good to see you. Thank you so much. Stay with us. Our show continues right after this break. Welcome to On the Record.
Looking for more On the Record? If you miss our Thursday showing at 8 p.m., join us for the re-airing on Friday mornings at 10, and then again each Sunday night at 8:30. Or go to our YouTube channel and catch up on all of our past episodes. And then like our Facebook and Instagram pages for a preview of upcoming shows and get a chance to ask your questions. Just look for On the Record.
Welcome back to On the Record. This segment is made possible by our friends at Executive Printers. Our topic this week, repair and prepare. While it is undeniable that Dorian brought massive destruction, we must admit that it also brought with it lessons only experience can teach. As a result of Hurricane Dorian, a group of Bahamian students completing their doctoral studies were assigned research regarding the experiences of survivors and responders in the wake of the hurricane. My guest is a representative of the team behind the research. She is here to give us an analysis, outcomes, and recommendations from their papers. She is Willissa Mackey. Welcome to On the Record.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk first about this group of students that you represent and what you all were studying relative to the hurricane, and why was it necessary for you to come together to do this research?
Well, we are students of Barry University. We are a part of its organizational learning and leadership doctoral cohort. There are 7 of us in the program, and 5 of us joined forces to get this research done to present here today.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about the data that you were able to collect and how you went about gathering this information.
So in the fall of 2019, during the peak of Dorian, we were engaged in a qualitative research class. Our lecturer that came in from Miami, she challenged us to go ahead and see what's there for us to find regarding the lived experiences of survivors and responders in the aftermath of Dorian. Mm-hmm. So we went ahead, of course, we did individual papers at first. And this was because it was a graded assignment. And we split up, we each interviewed 2 individuals, whether it was a survivor or a responder or both. We then went ahead and transcribed the interview, and from the transcription, we went ahead and we highlighted themes that came from the interviewees' responses. Those themes were then compiled because we noticed through communication that we had parallel themes amongst the papers, mm-hmm. and we went ahead and we wrote those parallel themes down because there were so many similar pieces to the findings.
So what were some of the, tell us what were some of the themes that you were able to determine, and what was around those themes and what information came from those themes?
Okay, so we went ahead and we categorized the themes into positive themes, challenging themes, and then we had themes for that we observed rather, and things that we can recommend to make our country better. Mm-hmm. And so with the positive themes, we had themes coming directly from the survivors. Things like resilience, tenacity, strength, hope and gratitude, and adaptability. We noted that those particular themes spoke strongly from those who had weathered the storm. Resiliency came out as they went through a life or death situation. And most of them spoke about this will to live, this fighting to get through. Now with the adaptability, of course, some of those who were from Abaco were evacuated here to Nassau, and so they had to find a new normal, as we're saying it. And the research continues to talk about how it's so maladaptive to remain in states of uncertainty and anxiety following disasters. So most of them, without even being aware of that research, were seeking that new sense of being.
Were there lots of differences, I'm still on the positives, in the survivors and responders, because I know you spoke to responders as well. Was there a lot of difference in what you got from them?
Absolutely, a lot of differences. From the responders, we had compassion, a lot of social responsibility and corporate social responsibility, altruism, social capital, fulfillment, and national development. From the responders, everything was centered on altruism. They didn't go through the storm, some of them. Some were survivors and responders. Mm-hmm. Most of them didn't go through the storm, but there was this sense of empathy and this sense of national development or citizenship that made them realize, hey, I have to help. I have to do something about this. And so they drew on their personal social capital to impact people who they didn't even know in some instances.
Again, in the positives, were there any other areas that the survivors spoke to that brought and it's hard to, I'm sure, even think of any positives that would have come out of this, but were there any other positives that the survivors spoke to in all of this that you all thought was interesting or noteworthy?
Absolutely. Well, you know, we say that the Bahamas is a Christian nation, And that came out very strongly
Really?
in the interviews. Most of them said, we knew we made it because of God's grace. They said things like, in everything give thanks. After having lost family members, personal possession, they still had this spiritual consciousness and awareness that they were able to be resilient and display tenacity because of their faith and their beliefs.
Wow. I want to now talk about the challenging themes with the survivors and responders as well. You spoke about the fact that there were positives, but there were also challenges. So let's talk about the challenges now.
As it relates to the challenging themes coming out from the research, it is important to note that there were two main themes. There was the lack of preparedness on behalf of some of the survivors, and there were limited resources. So let me speak with regards to lack of preparedness. There were some people that took a lackadaisical approach to this storm. But in all reality, no one could really prepare.
None of us knew it was coming.
Nobody. Yeah. However, some did admit that I could have done more if it was a regular storm. But considering the extent of this storm, there was nothing that I really could do. And then limited resources. One of my persons in particular, I went ahead and I interviewed a daughter who took in her displaced family members. And one of the things that came out in particular from that interview was they wanted to have them evacuated, but they simply didn't have the resources to get all of them to Nassau in time. There were 5 family members that one of my interviewees took in, and she said, we simply didn't have the money.
What was the experience like for you all having to conduct these interviews and to get people to open up about so many private things as well?
As a matter of fact, people were willing to talk.
Wow.
Talking can be very therapeutic. And I find that they were really willing to tell their stories. And we were willing to listen. You can learn so much just from listening to people and just from empathizing, putting ourselves in one's positions. But they were more than open and willing to talk.
And I've got to ask, sort of, what is next now from this research? You've got all this great information. Mm-hmm. What is next, and what are some of the key takeaways that you think we can learn from what you all have garnered?
Well, with regards to what is next, I'm not familiar if many people know about this ResearchGate platform that's available to researchers. Some joke around and call it the Facebook of research. And so you're able to log in, you're able to share your findings, and you're able to collaborate with other international researchers. So perhaps next steps for us would be getting our work on ResearchGate and adding to the literature here in the Bahamas. We do not do enough scholarly literature in the Bahamas. We do have our we call it our oral stories, but we don't have enough written information in the Bahamas.
You're
and
right.
so if we can get this transcribed and placed in the documents, I think that would be a really good initiative.
What would you say would be some of the key lessons, though, as a country that you think we learned that you could share with us from your research?
There were 9 observations and recommendations that came out. I will go ahead and discuss 3 of them.
Okay.
Communication. First and foremost, communication was a challenge. That was an observation. Our recommendation is to go ahead and look at the different tiers. When you look at the Bahamas, of course, we're government, and then we are communities, and then we're neighborhoods, and then we are individual families and homes. So getting the information to trickle from the head all the way down to individuals in a timely fashion, that is something that we absolutely need to work on. Bearing in mind that we do have a diverse country now, people who do not speak only English, and getting the word out to them in a timely fashion, in a language that they understand, is paramount.
Number 2?
It would speak with regards to infrastructure. Of course, we have excellent building codes. However, enforcing the building codes and perhaps going about this annual inspection prior to the hurricane season to ensure that homes and buildings can withstand anything that comes our way. Not everything, because Hurricane Dorian taught us that.
Yes.
But there are some things that we can be more proactive about rather than reactive. And so those annual inspections would be excellent.
And the third one?
Last but not least, evacuations. It seemed optional. There was no real, you must leave. And so with this COVID-19 time, of course, there were some mandatory things that were stipulated for us. When it comes to hurricanes, particularly those in low-lying areas, we need policies to make mandatory evacuations for individuals. People should not be permitted to stay. You have to leave. We need those.
I'm so happy that you said that. It'd be interesting to see what the others are. We're just out of time, but certainly at some point, you say you hope to put this on ResearchGate?
Yes, indeed.
Where we'll be able to go and see it.
Thank you so
hopefully
much.
very soon we'll be able to see all of your research. But I applaud you all for coming together and doing this. This type of information is so important for us, and I hope even our policymakers at some point have access to this so they get a better understanding of, what is needed and what's necessary and the experiences of our people. Thank you so very much. Great work.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the whole team. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And you said something very important. We need more academic studies in the country. I think we too often go off of emotion and what we feel and what we think should happen as opposed to going to actual data. But I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
When we come back, the coordinating agency answer some questions about the overall preparedness. Stay with us. This is On the Record. We're back right after this. Hello and welcome to On the Record and the balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. This segment is brought to you by private business contractors. Our topic this week, repair and prepare. Last year, Prime Minister announced the creation of a new ministry geared specifically towards the recovery of Grand Bahama and Abaco. My guest for this segment of the show is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction, Mr. Carl Smith. Mr. Smith, welcome to On the Record.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jerome.
It's your first time.
It's my first time here.
But you've been quoted and lots of times on this show, and we've been playing quite a bit of what's been happening in the ministry since its formation. But I want to talk specifically about the creation of that ministry and where we are since then. This was started in response to Hurricane Dorian. We're now at the start of a new hurricane season. What's the ministry's role at this point now as we move into this hurricane season?
Okay, if I may just give a backdrop. Prior to the creation of the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction, the disaster management fell under the Cabinet Office, or at times it was under the Office of the Prime Minister. And NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, is a department that falls under those ministries. So this new ministry was formed by the government given the extent of damage caused by Hurricane Dorian. And in doing so, an authority was also created, the Disaster Reconstruction Authority. The authority mandate is to focus primarily on reconstruction. Right. So for the edification of the public, it is structured much in the same way that the Ministry of Health is structured. So you have the Ministry of Health, you have the Public Hospital Authority that is responsible for managing the hospitals, and you have the Department of Public Health that manages the clinics. But get back, so the ministry and the Prime Minister, by the way, the Prime Minister is the minister responsible for disaster preparedness and reconstruction. And he has appointed a Minister of State, who is the Honorable Lewis, right? In the past, reconstruction was carried out by primarily the Department of Housing and the Ministry of Works because they focus primarily on people's homes or on infrastructure. But as I indicated, given the extent of devastation and the desire of the government to give focused attention to this enormous disaster, this ministry was created. The ministry itself focuses on policy. The Department of NEMA's primary focus is on preparation for an event and immediate response. So for example, as we are doing now, we are preparing, and preparation, by the way, is ongoing. It's continuous. And let me interject this here as well. NEMA is all of us. NEMA is a coordinating agency. So all agencies of government, as well as the private sector, are involved, or ought to be involved, in planning for and responding to an event. And it is termed a disaster when, as an individual, you have your home and a fire takes place, you can't extinguish the fire by yourself, so you call somebody else. When you have it at the national level, as a country, we don't have the resources, the capabilities, whatever it is, to respond by ourselves. So we call on other countries, other organizations to assist us. But in preparing for the disaster, you need to know what your partners have. How can they assist you? For example, just prior to my coming here, we were in discussions with the United States government. They are one of our closest partners. Later on today, we'll have a meeting with the United Kingdom representative here. So in the case of we don't, for example, the government itself has no helicopters. In an earlier show, I heard you mention evacuation. You probably would need a helicopter, depending on the nature of the disaster, to be able to evacuate persons. So in planning, you would make a listing of all of your partners, the resources that they have, so that when an event takes place, you know in advance, oh, I have your telephone number, I know the person, and they can respond. You asked the question, so what has been happening, I think it was, since the formation of the ministry and the creation of the authority. The authority was created in the aftermath of the disaster. And we had to be, and we still are, responding to that disaster, as well as creating and structuring and fine-tuning the organizations, both the ministry and the authority. I'm here not to give any excuses, but it is an enormous task. Recovery from a disaster does not happen overnight. It doesn't happen over months. It doesn't happen over years. We are making progress. I'm not entirely satisfied that we could not have done some things differently, but we're learning as we're going along. But at the same time, I think the public needs to understand, if you're on the ground and the kinds of challenges that you face as you plan, as you, for example, as you seek to establish new subdivisions, you don't just go there and rebuild. You have to determine where it is best to place that subdivision. In our scenario, we rely on groundwater. We have to protect the water lenses. And we are all islands, so we have to be away from the coastline. So it's a complex scenario.
And understood, there is a lot going on because it's not as in previous years where we've had such a massive rebuilding and reconstruction going on as we move into another active season. You mentioned, though, that there are some things that could have been done differently. Can you share those with us? What things you think we could have done differently that may have put us in a different or better position?
I think more engagement, not that we didn't make efforts to engage more persons, and it's difficult. When I say difficult, you need resources. We need additional professionals to assist us. You're talking about persons who are involved with planning and engineering and the likes. Persons are going to volunteer their services to an extent, but they have a livelihood.
They volunteer in that period.
They volunteer.
Right after it happens, I can help.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
I can't help indefinitely.
Exactly. And we had all kinds of volunteers. A lot of them are still with us. So having the resources to do it, the manpower, the professional resources, the physical infrastructure, we still don't have established as yet facilities. We're operating from facilities, don't misunderstand me, but they're not the ideal. You're never going to really get the ideal situation. Sure. So we have some challenges. And, but generally, I would say that we have fared very well.
Big question on everybody's mind, are we ready?
Hurricanes are rather unpredictable. Even though the science and technology is there, you can predict them with greater accuracy. I know the previous guest you had on talked about the Doppler radar and all that nice stuff. But unfortunately, we don't know with accuracy where these events are going to hit. What we do know is that given climate change, with the warming of the waters, that the hurricanes are going to be more frequent and more intense. I know that growing up as a youngster, in my day, I looked forward to hurricanes because they were quite mild and they happened just before school opened.
I think
things have changed.
Yeah, I would say in my age bracket we did too. You got
okay.
At least 2 or 3 days off from school.
Exactly. So things have changed. And so are we prepared? I don't know if we can say we do our best to be as prepared as we can, recognizing the challenges that we face. I'll give you an example, and I mentioned that my ministry is responsible for policy. It is a fact that we have in the Bahamas a number of settlements, a number of places that people live in very vulnerable positions. The government, all governments, have over time sought to place these persons or have them in better living conditions. The facts are that should a Category 5 hurricane come near them, you have to evacuate them. You need some place to evacuate them, and or you're going to face devastation. And that is exactly what happened in Dorian, right? Those are the facts. So when one talk about planning for and preparing, these are not overnight things. And you have to make the best decision for what's going to happen down the road. We know what we have in the Bahamas with respect to settlements. So the question is, what are we doing about it? I indicated the government made several attempts to rectify that, and you're faced with legal challenges. You see what I'm saying?
You're talking about shanty towns even and
yes, that's what I'm speaking about. I'm referring to this. Right. So, and a report was done recently where we don't have sufficient shelters to accommodate all of these persons. They're talking about persons who are normally residents here under whatever conditions they are, because whoever you are in the Bahamas, our job as human beings, as a country, is to do our best to take care of them. That's the reality. But at the same time, we need to face the reality that we cannot continue to have these circumstances exist and not experience the kind of experiences we've had as in Hurricane Dorian.
Bottom
so
line,
that's a policy decision.
we
That's
need
what
to
we
get
can
rid
do.
of the shanty towns.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Yet we consider that we still have these ongoing legal battles. Mr. Smith, we're going to take a break in the discussion. Stay with us. Our final segment is still to come.
Matt? Where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? And so it's about the
Listen,
while you were concentrating in Atlanta. So we can talk about it.
On the record tonight, the government's purchase of the Grand Hine is a hot subject in the news. Welcome back to our final segment. My guest, the Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness and Management and Reconstruction, Mr. Carl Smith. Repair and prepare is our topic tonight as we are at the start of the 2020 hurricane season. For many of us, we watched in horror in the aftermath of Dorian, the scramble for so many people to find just basic necessities, in some instances to evacuate, to find shelter. It was just a chaotic situation in so many instances, specifically in Abaco. Well, not completely, but in large part in Abaco. What are we doing to address a hypothetical situation like that again? If we have a massive storm and people are stuck, what are we going to do differently to avert some of the issues that we would have seen after a Dorian?
Okay, Jerome, I've indicated that planning for events such as those are ongoing. So we have ongoing discussions, and we have done worst case scenarios.
This is a new worst case scenario for us, though, right? I mean, the Dorian situation, did that change sort of the worst case scenario, or was that always a scenario as far as you're aware?
A worst case scenario is a hurricane moving up the archipelago of the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
Could you imagine a hurricane hitting our capital city? Yeah. So it's possible. Mm-hmm. You do your best and you pray. Mm-hmm. But it is something that involves everybody, all private and public sector agencies. It's a conversation because no one has all of the ideas. And we are very fortunate. We have a lot of wonderful friends, international friends, as countries as well as organizations. I'll give you an example. The Pacific Disaster Center, which is headquarters in Hawaii, when back in 2003, when I served as an interim director for NEMA, the US government facilitated a young lady who was doing her doctoral studies. And as a matter of fact, her doctoral studies are on hurricanes in the Bahamas. Anyway, she eventually became the director of the Pacific Disaster Center, which is based in Hawaii. And before Hurricane Dorian actually hit the Bahamas, 5 of her staff members were in NEMA working with us, getting the EOC
I remember hearing about her, yes.
And going. Mm-hmm. So those sorts of relationships are crucial. And the same PDC, Pacific Disaster Center, is doing a risk analysis of the disaster risk analysis of the entire Bahamas. It started before Hurricane Dorian. Of course, we've had to slow down because of COVID-19 and that sort of stuff. These things don't happen overnight because it is very involved. We try to engage the community because the people in the community know their community better than you.
And know what their needs are.
Right. And they come up with wonderful ideas as to, well, if something happens, this is what I should do. We have had plans this year, again, because coming out of Dorian, we had what is called an after-action report. We had wonderful plans to train people in the community, what we call CERT teams, working with existing organizations, because it's easier to work with something that has already existed. You know, we have the neighborhood watch councils nowadays, which is functioning already for crime, and they can.
So in a similar model.
In a similar model. Okay. So you train people in the community. All of this is ongoing because you train some people, they move out. Right. We had a simulation exercise planned for this year, and hopefully we will get some simulation exercise in. It may be tabletop. And just before I came here, we were talking about maybe July to do it because, you know, the hurricanes really peak in August, September.
August, September really is our time.
Right.
Yeah.
So we still have some time to...
Hopefully.
Right. Hopefully to fine-tune our preparation plan. So I don't want anybody to think, well, hurricane season is here and this man is talking about preparation. You should be prepared. It's an ongoing thing. And like this morning, we got notification that the UK vessel, the United Kingdom, always has a vessel in the Atlantic because they know that is what happens. And the vessel has changed, so they've given us the specification of that vessel in terms of size, its capacity, so we know, should something happen, it could...
That vessel went to Abaco last year.
Right.
That was one of the first vessels, I think,
The first vessel.
first lines of relief, yeah.
Right, so the vessel would change. They've notified us today, so we have discussions with them. So, sorry. How do you answer? You do your best with the resources you have, but you always have to be talking to your friends, your partners.
As we prepare to wrap up, I do want to know, though, on an island-by-island, case-by-case basis, are we prepared to deal with a disaster on each island of some magnitude? Is there a response plan, adequate shelters at that level to be able to respond island by island if we had to?
We have a national disaster preparedness and response plan. That plan is developed by contributions from all government agencies. And in the case of the Family Islands, the Family Island Administrator is the lead official, and he or she works along with other government agencies in terms of preparing a plan. So the same thing that we go through in New Providence, each of the Family Islands go through the same scenario. In terms of shelters, they would visit, have a look in the community, because this is another thing. We don't have any purpose-built facility to be used as shelters. I know when
We borrow space.
I know when the National Stadium was being developed, it was supposed to be designed with that in mind. Now, the Red Cross, as an example, and other agencies are coming out of this drawing, and we've had contribution from various philanthropists to put in place purposely built facilities to serve as not just shelters, but as community centers. And there are designs for that, and that's an ongoing work. It would have been wonderful if we had some of those on the ground by now. We don't, but it doesn't stop us from planning, and hopefully by next season they should be in place.
Councilman, we are out of time for this episode, but I want to thank you for coming and sharing some information with us, because I think one thing that Dorian has done for us, I think that's a positive. It's made us so much more aware of the importance of preparation. And you see a lot of people asking, are we prepared? Do we have this? Do we have that? What if, what if, what if? And these are legitimate questions Absolutely. Being raised, from people who have come through a very traumatic experience, whether you were in Abaco or Grand Bahama or not. Last year was very traumatic for us. But thank you for coming and providing us with some answers. As we get into the season, there will be more opportunities. I hope not that there will be a hurricane coming when we have another opportunity to talk, but hopefully at some point you'll be able to give us some more on the preparations and the simulations and all the things that have happened. So thank you very much for coming by. We
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
That's going to do it for tonight's episode of On the Record. Repair and prepare. We remind everyone to take all the precautionary measures by the authorities and do remain safe during this hurricane season. Just listen to official information. I can't say it enough. Wish to thank my guests, Mary Butler, Willissa Mackey, and Permanent Secretary Carl Smith, for being with us tonight, as well as my production and technical team for producing this show weekly. Of course, to you, our audience, thanks for watching. See you next time, same place, same time, right here on The Record.